I'm very happy to have Rachel Reed with me here, who's the keynote speaker for the State of Birth Symposium in October. And we'll dive straight in with the question, what is the greatest challenge, or one of the greatest challenges facing expectant parents right now?
I think probably the biggest challenge is that the maternity services were not set up to support them. And I don't think they know that. So you've got parents having expectations of a maternity system that it's woman-centered, evidence-based, and will promote and support physiology. And it doesn't, because it can't. So I think that's probably the biggest.
And so how can we change that? What do we need to do?
Well, we can't change the system, unfortunately. That would be ideal. I think all we can do, particularly as care providers and educators, is to make sure that parents understand the context they're birthing in. And that would look different depending on where they're planning to birth. But it's about being really honest, not frightening parents, because, the systems aren't, the intention is good, but really ensuring they understand that they need to take responsibility for the decisions that they make, that they are the experts on what they want and what they need, because the system is set up in a very generalized way. So it's helping parents to understand the system and understand how they can navigate through as individuals and fit this very generalized maternity system around their individual needs.
And so with first-time expectant parents who maybe don't know what's coming, how do we help them understand how to take more responsibility and how to get the information that's going to help them make decisions?
Okay, well, first of all, don't go with the flow. Not unless you're happy with where the flow is going. So I think it's really about helping them to think about what it is that they want from their birth experience, what is important for them. For example, if they want an elective cesarean section and they want as much medicine and intervention as possible, then maybe private obstetrician is the best place to go. But if they're wanting a physiological birth with minimal intervention, do they have options in that? A lot of parents don't. A lot of parents don't have choices in terms of what's offered to them or what they can afford. But if they do, helping explore, trying to get the best fit in terms of where you're birthing. So that would be one step that not all parents can do. And also just, okay, so what is the system like where you're going? So if you're birthing in the local hospital, what are their norms? Because there's no point going in with a birth plan saying, I don't want an episiotomy, if they don't do them routinely and they're very rare. There's no point. However, if you know that this hospital routinely does that and it's common, then that's something that you need to document so that you can advocate for that when you're in that system. So it's really about the care provider or the educator really talking about what is the norm in this setting and how can we own our decisions within that setting. And because it's such a generalized setting, it doesn't actually care about the decisions that individuals make. In my experience of working in maternity systems, nobody really cares that somebody comes in and says, I don't want to do this, that, or the other. What they care about is that person is taking responsibility for that and essentially covering the back of the care provider. If it's documented and that person's asking, particularly if they have someone advocating for them, like a doula, for example, who's pointing to the birth plan, then that takes the pressure off the care provider. So it's not personal. I think that's another important thing for parents to know. This is not about them and us. The system is not, personally going to judge them for what they're doing. The system runs efficiently and effectively for the system. So it's about helping to support parents really navigate that. And that would look different for different parents and different for where they're choosing to birth.
Yeah, Deepa was pointing out that if you buy a car or some other big item, you do quite a lot of research around it to decide what is going to be right for you. And I was talking about how in the Witch website, they've even got a sort of tool that you can answer questions and it pops out an answer of the best birth location for you.
Oh, wow.
So they were trying to kind of help people go through that process, but without the information to help you understand maybe what you want to answer. So they got part of the way there. So could you explain, in Australia, is antenatal education sort of standard through hospitals, or is it all sort of privately accessed?
Yeah, so there is public hospitals and private hospitals will provide their own antenatal education, but it's again very set around the needs of the institution, which is to make sure that parents coming in know what their options are in terms of pain relief, know where to park, all of that kind of stuff. And I would say that really anybody who's going to birth in a system, it's really helpful to take some antenatal classes that are outside of that will better meet your needs around what it is that you want. Do you want to learn how to support your partner during labour and birth? Do you want to prepare for the breastfeeding of the baby? Because hospital education, I used to teach hospital childbirth education. It can be, it depends where it is, but it can be quite limited. The curriculum, I used to get into trouble because I'd go off road on the curriculum. So just to be mindful that you'll get some knowledge about how to maybe park and what pain relief options are available and that kind of information. But if you really want to know a little bit more, then it is worth going outside of that to get it.
Well, thank you so much for this answer. I know we could talk for ages about it, but I think you've given a very clear insight into actually what the issue is and what people can do about it. But there is, with the internet particularly, there's so many options to learn more. So I can't wait to hear you at the symposium. And thank you so much for joining me.
This is Deepa Santosh. She's one of the speakers at the State of Birth Symposium in October. And I wanted to ask you, what's one of the greatest challenges that expectant parents face right now?
Oh, okay. There's plenty, isn't it? I think for me, as a final year midwifery student, and also what I've seen in the birthing community, I think accessing parental education or antenatal education, I feel like that's the biggest challenge currently. Ever since COVID hit, some trusts went into a model of straight away going online and offering it, and other trusts sort of withdrew it, and then because of staffing reasons haven't really gone back into it. So that's on the NHS side, and then you have a number of private players as well. So I suppose it's quite difficult for parents to sort of really know whether, first of all, the importance of it, and also like how to choose.
Yeah, I agree with you. In my pregnancy yoga classes, I quite often get the impression that either people have heard of National Childbirth Trust, the NCT classes, and they just book on it without even really thinking whether it's right for them or not.
Yeah.
And then you have other people who don't know what is out there and don't realise maybe that there's a free class through the hospital. So at the RBH, at the moment, as far as I know, it's still online. And so people might book onto that, but if you leave it too long, there's quite a waiting list and you might not get on, and it's quite tricky. I don't think there's a discussion about that early on with your midwife. So what would you like it to look like?
I think first of all, we need to emphasize on the importance of antenatal education, and I feel sometimes don't realize until you go into birth, say, how much of a difference it would make if you actually knew what was going to happen and how you can handle it. And, we do a lot of research on everything today. We have information at our fingertips. You're going to buy a car, you're going to scroll so many websites and look at different models and things like that. But when it comes to birth, and I don't know, many people I've seen say, oh, I'm going to go with the flow, which I respect. But you don't know, the flow is according to whose direction. And you sort of want the flow to go in the way you would ideally like it to go. And that you can actually have an impact on it if we actually know what to expect and how to handle different things. So for me, I think emphasis, first of all, on the importance that we need to learn about it, and we need antenatal education. And in our clinics, we sort of cover it quite early. We talk about it straight away in the booking appointment. We start talking about it in the early days, but it's impossible in a midwifery 20-minute appointment to talk about everything. So, but we do say, like, quite early on, to say, start looking at, classes. Some trusts offer, like yours might offer. Currently where I work, they don't. But there are multiple private players as well. And it is not as expensive as we think it to be. Sometimes you can see that there are providers who are charging, say, 200 plus, 250 plus pounds. It's very expensive. But on the other hand, you can actually access a really good online antenatal education program for as little as £30, with a number of recorded videos and lots of resources. So you can play around, you can have a look around and see, there's so much variety available. And also it's about choosing what kind of classes you want to attend. When you attend hospital providing classes, you want to make sure that it's sort of what you want, and how balanced it is. And the other side, there are private providers, and you want to know that they are also having a balanced view about what birth actually is, so that you get the complete picture. So it's not either idealistic or it's not completely interventionistic.
And I think a lot of parents don't realise that there's a register for antenatal educators. So FEDANT means Federation for Antenatal Educators, and they have a big long list of people who've been accredited. So if somebody was looking at private workshops or courses, that's one place where they could look and see, has it gone through a process where the content has been looked over and assessed. So and I was thinking, I remember a while ago I saw on the Which website, where you were saying that you can choose a car, or so there was one for birth location. So on the Which website, you can go in and you answer various questions, and it will go through to a recommended birth location for you. And it's based on some research, and they say it's also based on expectant parents' sort of opinions, and so it's not just completely made up. But what I thought was interesting about it is that actually, if you just answered those questions without knowing something about different environments, right, you might just make a decision, well, yes, that sounds good, without really knowing what the implications are. So what I would have really liked on that tool is a little button which you could press and they learn more about water birth, or learn more about X, Y, or Z, so that somebody was really informed when they ticked yes or no.
Yeah, absolutely. I think the first thing I would want is, for people to understand the importance, first of all. And the second step would be like how to access it and what to look for, because there is a wide range.
And I think you're right. There's a big difference between the online courses and being able to go in person to a course, because like with the pregnancy yoga, a big part of what we're doing is helping people try out positions they might actually use during the birth, so that it's not the first time they've ever been in that position, but actually they've worked out, well, this one feels more comfortable. I feel more relaxed in that position. I think they're more likely to walk into the labour room and go, oh, great, there's a ball, or good, there's a really comfortable looking mat and I can go kneel on that and lean onto a chair or lean onto a ball.
Yeah.
Whereas if you've only ever seen a photo online and you go, oh, right, oh, I didn't realise you could be in that position in labour. That's good, but it's not as good as actually having tried it yourself.
Yeah. And I think what COVID has taught us is that there are pros and cons to every approach, and whatever suits you. Obviously, being face-to-face and doing a live session with someone is completely different. And again, it comes at a price if it's a private provider. And online sessions means that you have your comfort of your own schedule, your own home, and things like that. So whatever's important for you, you can pick and choose today. But I think it's so important that sometimes it breaks my heart when somebody comes in and they have absolutely no clue on what to expect and how it's going to go and what are the different kinds of pain relief options, and can they use water? So many things that, and in today's age of informed consent, when you're a midwife and delivery suite and you're having to it just becomes a monologue, maybe, like when you're having to sort of cite all the pros and all the cons, the risks and the benefits. You don't have much chance for it to discuss it, in terms of what they want. If you have the time, brilliant. If things are going at that pace, that's brilliant. But if they're not, then if you're in a situation where you have to quickly make a choice, it'd be amazing if they actually knew what it entailed.
Yeah, thank you. I think that's a great answer to what is the greatest challenge, and actually something that we could do something about. There's actually lots of solutions, whether it, like you say, just showing people that there's a range of online courses that they can access quite cheaply, to, maybe thinking again within a particular hospital about, is this important enough that we put some money behind it to actually make it free to expectant parents in our area.
Yeah. And again, when it was available, the NHS classes, you do, like you're saying, there's a waiting list. And I remember running my classes. I used to run antenatal breastfeeding sessions, and they used to be like completely chock-a-block book, and there have been many people who weren't able to come on it. And again, by having these various options, sometimes and online, when I switched to the online mode when COVID hit, we were able to cover a large number of people than when it was face-to-face. But again, there's very different approaches. But it's important to at least do something.
Yeah, and because you have a background as a doula as well, don't you? So I imagine part of what's really lovely about that role is that you have more time to have conversations about different options and do that education.
Yeah, absolutely. And today, being a final year midwifery student, I try as much as I can, right, in antenatal appointments, because I love antenatal education, and as you can see, it's really, I know, is really important. As well as when they're giving birth, I do sort of pick my doula hat on and so go into, while you're doing the clinical part of it. It's also nice to sort of dip into the doula side of it to really understand the person being birthed, and that's an advantage, I think.
Yeah. Well, I think they're incredibly lucky if they have you as their midwife. I'd be very happy to have you as a midwife.
Oh, thank you. Well, I've got 10 more months to go, I think. So.
Brilliant. Oh, well, I can't wait to hear you talk about how you make change at the symposium, because it's so important. It is possible, and taking action is important. So thank you so much, Tessa.
Lovely talking to you, Tessa. Bye.
I have with me here Mandy Rees from Mother for Life, and I'm really excited that she's going to be part of the State of Birth Symposium in October, because one of the themes that came out last year was the importance of community, the importance of talking to each other, and circles just kept coming through each of the talks. It was amazing. It was an unplanned theme. So I'm really excited that you're going to be talking more about all those sorts of things. But for the moment, I would love to ask you, what do you think is the greatest challenge facing expectant parents right now? Or one?
Can I be cheeky and go for two, but they are interconnected? I think from the parents that I sit in circle with, the mums to be, it's overwhelm and also time to communicate effectively with their partner or with the midwifery team that they're under, so that they can actually work out what it is they want for their parenthood journey, whether that's birth or parenting. It's that there's so much information coming from so many places, whether it's the hospital, the maternity unit, your family, your friends, Google, leaflets from the NHS. There's just this huge overwhelming sensation that they don't know where to go that feels right for them. And I find that lots of particularly mums, because that's who I spend my time with, feel that they're being pushed in a certain direction because it's what they've been told they have to do or they should do, even if it doesn't feel authentically right for themselves. And they don't have the time to sit, process it, talk it through with their partner or whoever they want to discuss it with. And I think that causes a lot of anxiety, and that's a really big challenge.
Yeah, I really hear that overwhelm. And I remember, I mean, it's years ago now, but when I was pregnant, just feeling like I was being bombarded with leaflets, let alone information on the internet. And to sort your way through is quite a process. So what sort of tips do you have for those parents?
Almost in an ideal world, right at the beginning of your journey, sit down with whoever you're parenting with, if you are parenting with someone, obviously on your own if you're a lone parent, and decide what kind of parent do you want to be and what do you want for your journey, whether that's your birth experience, the first few weeks or months, or a longer plan for your parenting, and feel really comfortable and confident in the choices that you make at that point, that you can keep referring back to when you do feel that you're being pulled off your path. Because as you and I know from, our journeys, you will get advice on where you should give birth, how you should give birth, what feeding you should do, how your baby should sleep, when you should wean them, schools they should go to. The overwhelm doesn't stop at birth, does it? It just continues the whole time you're a parent. And if you could sit down with the person that you're parenting with, or with yourself if that's you, and decide how you want to do it, and feel really confident and committed in those decisions, and really stick together if you are a team, so that you can bat all this information aside, or when you feel it's overwhelming, you can go back to this kind of plan or document, or even if it's in your head, and just realize, we made this decision and it felt really right for us. Things will come along. I mean, things happen, don't they? Life gets in the way, people do get poorly and things like that, so it might be interrupted, but you have this foundation so that you feel really confident. Because I find that the overwhelm leads to insecurity, which leads to the anxiety, which isn't helpful for anybody. And if we had this time to really think about how we want to parent before the baby was born, that would be amazing. And that could be sitting with your partner, that could be sitting with other mums, it could be talking to your family, it could be calling in other expert help. But don't be afraid to ask for help if you need it, but also don't be afraid to trust your gut instincts on the parent you want to be.
And you were talking about communication also with the health professionals, and it's a tricky one, I think, because sometimes people don't want to think too far ahead in the pregnancy in case something happens, or start buying baby things too early. But on the other hand, sometimes I feel like the antenatal education comes quite late in the whole process, and I might have somebody come into pregnancy yoga who at 30 weeks, 34 weeks even, is still not having really any clear idea about where they want to have the baby. So, I'm wondering whether part of the communication is about trying to have those discussions earlier, we were talking about overwhelm with information, but
you know, maybe there could be a hub, a trusted place where somebody could go to kind of point them in the different directions to start thinking about it. So they've got plenty of time to think about all the options.
Yeah, and it's also being able to work out what information you really do need to know. So I get lots of pregnant mums in my yoga class who are inundated with information that's actually irrelevant to them. You know, they don't have to worry about gestational diabetes. They haven't got, you know, their placentas, you know, not forward facing or anything like that. They haven't got to worry about other health complications, but they're still receiving the information. And it's kind of, really, we need a more bespoke system, don't we, that looks at everyone as an individual. That's the crux of it. You know, you and I could talk for hours about birth experiences and mums who feel that they're kind of being persuaded down a certain route because that's what everyone else does, but actually is an elective C-section the best option for her rather than trying for a VBAC, or is a VBAC a right option rather than trying for an elective C-section, depending on her personal circumstances. It's like every mum of a certain age gets pushed into the geriatric mum category without looking at the individual situations of that woman. And is that right for her? Are there any other risk factors? That would be wonderful if we could have the time to sit down with that mum to be, ideally with her partner if she has one, and say, okay, so you are 45, but you don't have any other risk factors. So actually, I don't think this bit's relevant to you, but this bit is relevant to you. So that there isn't that overwhelm, because you know that you're only looking at the stuff that you really need. And that's what I find. It's like, well, I've been to my antenatal appointment, I've been given 57 leaflets, but I'm not sure whether only 56 of them are irrelevant and only one applies to me.
Yeah, brilliant. Well, thank you so much.
And
very warm welcome to Amy Fergus-Fuller, who's one of the speakers at the State of Birth Symposium happening in mid-October, less than a month away now. And I'm asking all of the speakers, what is the greatest challenge that expectant parents face right now? And what's coming up is actually there are lots of challenges. So it might be that you focus in on one, but I'd love to hear, Amy, what you're thinking.
Thanks, Tessa. So yes, there are many. So when you asked me this question, I really had to think, and my initial reaction was, oh, what do I pick? But I feel like from my experience with my students and also myself, the biggest problem is the fear mongering that's going on. And I suppose in a sense, I don't necessarily like to say lies, because I don't know if people mean to be lying, but the misinformation that's going about, which is causing this fear mongering. So people are going in to see their midwives, going into hospitals, speaking to people, going for various antenatal courses, and they seem to be getting told all these different things that can happen and the risks that can happen, which of course is important. People need to know what the risks are, but they're not being informed on the risks. So they're just being told, for instance, somebody I know recently went for their first scan, they were 15 weeks pregnant. They went privately and spoke to the woman who was doing it was a midwife. And it just so happens that the mum-to-be is very small and the dad-to-be is very big. And so the midwife said, well, looking at you and looking at him, you're going to have a big baby. We're going to need to schedule you for an induction. I cannot believe that at 15 weeks, they're being told you're going to need to be induced. It's insane to me, and infuriates me, because then they take that as verbatim. They just say, okay, sure, you must know because you're a midwife, you've done your training, you've had your experience, you're part of the NHS, you know better than I do, surely, and you know better than anybody else out there. And that just isn't necessarily the case, because where has this information come from? And when you look at everything else that can come out, like being told you have a big baby, or you have a small baby, or you have a small pelvis, or you've had a cesarean, you're not going to be able to have a natural birth this time. all of these kind of what ifs are coming from a place of no evidence. When you try to look for the evidence and you look for the research is tiny or it's non-existent. So where has any of this come from? I was actually having a chat with a hypnobirther today, and we were talking about something very similar. And I mentioned this to her, and she said, yeah, this is something that I keep getting told, and I don't really understand where it comes from because I can't find anything in the research. And I said, well, that's because there isn't. It's completely non-evidence based. And when you question somebody in the medical profession about that, they don't have an answer. The same goes for people who are being told your waters are broken, you must come in 24 hours later if you haven't gone into labour because your chances of infection have doubled. Again, that's not necessarily the case. I mean, yes, the infection may have doubled, the chance of it may have doubled, but they are again not informing them on what that risk is. And the risk is so low that most people will hear that and say, oh, so what you actually mean is I'm going from, I mean, Tessa, you can correct me if my numbers are wrong, but I think it's 0.05% before that 24-hour period when your waters are broken to 1% or 0.1% when your waters have broken. That's such a tiny, tiny number that the chance is still so very low. And for some, they might say, that's enough, actually, I do want to be induced because that risk is enough for me to worry. And that's fair enough. But by simply saying to somebody, your risk has doubled, you're putting the fear of God into them, because then they think I'm going from 0 to 50%, which is not true. And then, of course, they're going to only want to do what's best for their baby and end up being induced. So then for me and the work that I do and my own experience, we're seeing people getting induced before they should be induced, being induced for reasons that they probably shouldn't be getting induced for. And then 80% of them are going to end up having a cesarean because that is the rate of induction to cesarean, something like 80%. And that is a huge number to go from you might have your baby now to, well, let's rush you in for a cesarean because it's not working. You've been at this for too long.
And I can hear your frustration, and I wonder, you know, what is the antidote to this? What do you say to your pregnant clients?
I say to them, informing yourself is the most important thing. So if the problem is that informed risk is not there, then informing yourself is what matters. And seeking out people who are giving you all the facts, not just facts from a medical point of view or from an experience point of view, but a researched vat of information. So to be able to go to a course or go to a teacher and say, right, I'm being told this. What are the actual risks? Do I need to be induced? Do I need to have a cesarean? Or do I have another route to go down? Can I still have a natural birth? And I think that's the only way forward is properly informing yourself. I wasn't informed enough when I had my son, and I ended up having a cesarean because of that. And now, knowing everything that I know, it would have been very different because I am informed now. I know all the risks and what the real risks are. So if I was to go in and be told what I was told, which is your waters have broken, come back 24 hours later, I'd say, actually, no, I don't need to, it's okay.
In the past, I always thought, you know, it's really important to share positive birth stories to balance out the negative stories that people tend to hear most of when they're pregnant. And now I'm beginning to think, it would be important to share stories that show the intricacies, some of the detail that happens during a birthing journey. And inevitably, there'll be some ups and some downs during the whole process. Because I think when you're a first-time parent, you just don't realise all the different components that, you know, make up a labour. And if you hear some of the sort of details from people of where they had to make a decision, or where they had to decide and sort of analyse some information they were given, you start to see how involved and how engaged you have to be.
Yeah, I would definitely agree. I think, and that is part of the problem. And I've experienced so many people saying, I don't want to listen to negative birth stories. But perhaps, like you said, it needs to be spun to be, it's not that it's a negative birth story, it's learning about the current situation. You know, it's not as simple anymore as these are the things that can happen during your birth, because now we're going against policies and systems that are not helpful necessarily, and we are having to fight those policies and systems. You know, I had a teacher ask me, if you've got students who don't want to have a vaginal examination, how do you help them avoid that, essentially? And I said, what I've done with my students in the past is let them know, firstly, that it has to be consented to, and that they absolutely don't have to do it, but that they are probably going to come against a lot of force to try and make them do it. And they may just need to be prepared to really stick to their guns, which again, someone I think can only do if they know what they're allowed to do, what they want to do, and why something is being asked of them, and whether it's really necessary. So yeah, I think to be honest, it would be helpful for people to hear stories from every angle, especially if they can be told in a safe space. So, I mean, Tessa, I know that you run lots of mothers' circles and things like that. But if you're in a space among a lot of women who are going through an experience you're about to go through, and you're in a place with somebody who can lead that session, as in, if things start to get a little bit too emotional, finding a way to drive that in another direction, so that instead what people can gain from it is just the necessary information and the support that they need to take them through this journey. Yeah.
I'm very excited that one of the speakers is Mandy Rees, who holds Mother Circles, and this really came out of the State of Birth Symposium last year, where it was a theme that we didn't anticipate, but was community, bringing people together, talking, sharing knowledge and experience. So it's great that you've talked about that. I think you're right. It's finding the right environment where difficult stories can be shared in a way that will be empowering rather than upsetting.
Yeah, absolutely. Yeah,
brilliant.
Exciting.
Well, I can't wait to hear from you in October. Thank you so much for sharing your thoughts now about the greatest challenges. And we'll unpack it even more during the symposium.
Thanks, Nadia. Lovely to see you. It's one of the speakers for the State of Birth Symposium, which is happening mid-October, just over a month away now. And I really wanted to get in touch with the speakers and ask them, what do they think are the biggest challenges for expectant parents right now? And then what do you do about it? What action can you take? So would you like to dive in, because you've got such a wealth of experience, a very talented pregnancy yoga teacher. You've been doing so much around birth for years now. So I'd love to hear what you think.
Okay, well, thank you, Tessa. So my thoughts on your question are that the biggest challenge facing the pregnant community today is the system itself. And the more I thought about the system, and as a birth doula and as a teacher, I think about the system a lot. The more I thought about the system, the more I let's first of all talk a little bit about what the system is, because this word is kind of bandied about, and I know as a birth doula there's a lot of cynicism in the birth professional community, and that cynicism is because there's a sense of disempowerment within the birth professionals community. And of course, if the birth professionals are disempowered, where does that leave the pregnant community? So this disempowerment and this cynicism that seems to be rife at the moment, as all the statistics just keep climbing, despite more community birth professionals than ever before. I've been a doula since 2009. And when I was first a doula, there were a few hundred of us. Now there are thousands of us. Hypnobirthing didn't even exist. Now it's everywhere. Yoga is everywhere. There is so much in the community. And yet, despite all of this, women in their tens of thousands are having interventions they did not want. And they are being told that they need them. So the system is failing women, and the system is bigger than any one person. It's no one particular person, and it's certainly not that really nice midwife that looked after you so well when you were having your baby. It's not even that frustrating obstetrician who's telling you can't do A, B, and C. They're all performing their role within something which in a sense has a life of its own and is bigger than any one individual. It serves the state, and it serves legislation, and it serves society at large. It does not serve the individual. And as a woman who has been pregnant 4 times and given birth 4 times, I have personally come up against the system many, many times, whether it's to accept an unwanted amniocentesis with all the risks that it involves, including miscarriage. I declined it, was intensely pressurized, and gave birth to a beautiful baby girl with no problems at all. I could have lost my baby had I agreed to that unnecessary intervention. Unwanted cesareans, unwanted inductions, unwanted monitoring, unwanted antibiotics. Personally, I have had to fight against the imposition of all of those interventions on my body and on the bodies of my babies. So it is a subject that is close to my heart. We don't want to talk too much about the problem in our 10-minute slot. So let's talk a little bit more about the solutions. And I know that this symposium is attended by birth professionals, as well as the birthing community. And one of my peers shared a post today on the importance of taking action. And that got me thinking as well, because while that's true to a certain degree, and in many ways this symposium is a call to action, And it is really important that we birth professionals reevaluate what it is we're doing, because it's not working. But allied to that is the equally important opposite, which is the path of non-action. And whilst the birth professional community needs to reevaluate what they're doing and take action, ultimately what's needed for childbirth is non-action, because it's all of this taking of action that is radically interfering with our births. From the moment we look inside the womb, to monitoring the labor, to calling it in too early, to cutting open the abdomen to take out the baby, the impositions, the fixing, and the fixing before the problem even arises, in case it might arise, is what's led to this crisis in intervention.
And you were talking about how you had to fight, you know, at different times with different babies of your own. And I'm just wondering, when you think about the system and non-action, actually that can be quite frightening, can't it, for maybe a first-time parent who didn't realise that there might be a fight to have an uninterrupted birth. So can you talk a little bit to that? You know, how do you prepare yourself to have that agency?
And agency is the key word. And I think I'm taking a real interest in the free birthing community. I have not experienced free birth. I've experienced birth free of the system with independent midwives, but I always chose to have a guide and birth professional with me. But the agency of the free birth community, we can all learn a lot from. Because when you choose to step outside the system, you necessarily choose to become properly informed. And it requires a taking of responsibility that many couples, many parents just don't realize they need to take, because there is such an implicit, unquestioned trust in the system, which is really surprising, you know, given the information that is out there. So yes,
that's what happened two Sundays ago. I did a birth preparation workshop, and I always ask at the beginning, how ready are you feeling for the birth? Both people in the partnership, if they're both there. And one of the fathers said, "Oh, 10, I'm completely ready. First baby." And I sort of took it, okay. And I've heard since from his partner that actually going through the workshop, he realised that actually the agency that is needed, and whereas he thought he would sit on the side, he's realised actually he needs to start doing his homework and reading and preparing. So it was this kickstart. Yeah. But yeah, I see that sometimes. Yeah.
Yes, I think real, and this kind of feeds back to the birth professional side of thing, because whether you're a birth doula or a yoga teacher or a hypnobirther, or just serving pregnancy and birth in any way, I mean, specifically, and this is where it comes back to yoga. I mean, I'm teaching yoga for pregnancy and birth. The whole thrust of yoga is to yoke with the universal energies, to yoke with what is in its deepest truth. And in pregnancy yoga, the deepest truth is nature. It's what's happening in the body, and and the birthing energies that are coming through. And we need to equip our students, the women that come through our classes, the people that come through our classes, we need to equip them with the resources so that they can truly yoke themselves to the experience without the distractions and the obstacles of the fear of the system and the risk of the system coming in, which pulls everybody from their, from this intention. And this is the path of pregnancy yoga. And of course, there is a caveat to that. And of course, there are times when there are genuine complications, but mostly they're just variations on normal. Every single one of my 4 pregnancies has been a variation on normal that the system saw as a complication. So there is, it does feel to me like this is a really interesting time. It's a time when birth professionals need to reevaluate how they're teaching and what they're teaching. And if they step up as community leaders, then so that they give the community the information that they need. And if you're working with the inner life, which you are if you're a yoga teacher or a hypnobirther or a doula, then you are needing to resource the community deeply and powerfully for the challenges that that are coming.
As I'm hearing you talk, what I'm thinking is sometimes that trust that people have in the system could actually be complacency. That's quite a harsh way of putting it, but it sounds to me like you're saying here, like a wake-up call here.
Yeah, absolutely. A big wake-up call. I mean, when I started I would say that the cynicism in the birth community has been around, in the doula community, I would say has been around for the last 2 years. I mean, just COVID, of course, a huge sea change. So, what are we talking? 3 years. So 3 years, but I mean, even before that, the steady increase in inductions, the rise in cesareans, and now I'm hearing lots of home birth units are being challenged. Birth centres at major hospitals are closed. So women are ending up on the labour ward with all the. A labour ward is a synonym for a laboratory. And I know that sounds quite strong, but I do feel, and what animal births well in a laboratory?
Yeah, thank you so much. I mean, the State of Birth Symposium, as you said, is, bringing people together, getting them to think about some of these things, and also about reigniting your passion. So actually, if your passion has waned a bit over the last 3 years and you're just feeling burnt out, to come together with some like-minded people and hopefully reignite the passion and take action, or inaction, as Nadia's been saying.
Absolutely. And the last thing I would want to say would be that, that was my path. For many years, I was kind of just teaching a one-size-fits-all program to cover every eventuality, so that everyone felt happy, so that no one was upset. And I realized that actually in doing that, I'm letting everyone down. I wasn't stepping up as a community guide. I was doing the same as the system, and I don't work for the system.
Well, I, for one, cannot wait to hear you speak at the symposium. I've asked all the speakers to bring practical elements into the sessions, so that as well as making you think, there are tangible things that people can go in on the Monday morning when they see their client or their patient and do something different.
Yeah. Absolutely. I'm so looking forward to teaching and speaking, and I'm looking forward to hearing all the amazing speakers that are lined up for the symposium. Thank you for inviting me, Tessa.